Krista, this is very fun. Here we are on the Open Door Sisterhood podcast.
So fun. I love talking about spaces and how to set up spaces. So I'm just really excited.
So I think we're a good pair on this conversation because you are highly gifted in this area of setting up physical spaces, and I am the opposite. So I get to play the dummy because I am in this area, and I feel totally fine saying that. I can't be good at everything. I've grown a lot in this space of not comparing myself to you or to other people in this. And I'm trying to do better. So we are going to hear some mentions of me throughout this conversation, talking about how you have inspired some spaces in our home because I use you as my personal coach. But we are on this series of back to school COVID style. And for a lot of us, me included, you included, that means kids are going to be home more than they typically are. Mm-hmm. My kids are going to be home full time starting, yesterday for when this airs. My kids start full time at home, and I have been doing some intentional things to get our house ready. And your kids are going to be home
part-time.
So let's talk to the mom who is going to have kids at home more. Maybe it's full-time, maybe it's part-time, about how to set up space well. And we want to start the conversation with the caveat. We all have different sizes of spaces.
Right.
We all have different sizes of families. So you're going to give us some principles that we can apply no matter the type of space we live in. And for example, I am going to have 6 people at home full time because my husband is still working from home. And we are all going to be trying to stream things at the same time. So we're a little concerned about the internet. But that's not everybody's case. And we know that the examples that we give from our own homes may not directly translate to you, the listener's exact situation. We're not implying everyone should have a huge house or extra rooms or any of that. We're just saying work with what you've got. And Krista's going to give us some really awesome ideas on how to work with what we've got as far as our space. So, Krista, why don't you tell us, first of all, about your little coaching, I shouldn't call it little, it's not little, your coaching business that is just ramping up this summer and how this conversation all connects directly to it.
Well, I love life coaching, and I really felt called specifically to the home. And so it's home coaching. I'm a home coach, and I really address all aspects of home, from the physical space and how we feel and how we create the physical setup of our home, to how we put meals on the table, to how we navigate relationships, how we make meaningful, I even help people plan meaningful events for their family. An example would be my husband and I just celebrated a big anniversary this past weekend, and I created this, really special event for just our family. I mean, it's COVID. We only had our family there, but it was really meaningful and really special. And I help people actually plan different events for their families that can, just add that layer of meaning that makes things so impactful and significant. To, how do you set up legacy in a family? So really that's the scope of my home coaching. But today we're really camping in the physical space. I do have my degree in interior design. And so I love this. And I just have a bent for it. I just love talking to people about how to make their home work for them. I think so often we're a slave to our home. The home is not meant, you are not meant to serve the home. The home is meant to serve you and your family and where you are in this phase of life. And for those people that are schooling in whatever capacity this year, the home really needs to serve you this year. You have a very specific practical need. And so, we're here to talk about how can that happen?
Great. And I think a lot of people are wondering that, especially as they're trying to divvy up spaces that typically haven't been school spaces for new stuff. So why don't you tell us, what is the first thing that people need to mentally kind of shift as they're considering, how am I going to set up my home for schooling?
So the first thing to consider, and this is obvious, but we have to start there, is thinking through what space in my home can I repurpose for a greater need that our family has at the moment. So let me just give you an example of that. In our last house, we had a dining room and we used the dining room. It wasn't like we had another kitchen table. We used the dining room every night. But we didn't have a space where kids could do homework. We didn't have a space where computers could be out in the open, which is a really big value for me, that we have computers in a public space, not a private space. And so we didn't have that. And so I thought, okay, I can make our living room we have a great room concept in that house. And so I could make that great room a little more condensed. I could take out a little bit of furniture, put the dining room table behind the furniture in the great room, and then make the dining room a school space. And so we actually totally did it. We moved the table out. I even hung chandeliers in the living room space to make it feel more like a dining room. And then I created this school space in the dining room. Now, let me tell you a little bit about what I did. So I actually painted half of the one wall as a chalkboard wall. And this is what's so great. If you can find people on Facebook Marketplace that do woodworking or something, you actually can create something that's a little more custom and usually isn't too expensive because they're tradesmen in your area who are looking for work, especially on Facebook Marketplace. And so I actually had a local guy from a small town build these 2 tables that were like bar tables like you'd find in a coffee shop. And I had him build them the length of the chalkboard wall. And so we had they weren't big tables because we didn't have room for that, but we could actually put bar tables the length of the wall. And I had him make 2 so that eventually when we didn't use that for a schoolroom space anymore, they'd be more practical for another space. Because I didn't, a huge long table you may not be able to use and repurpose. Because again, families change and you're going to keep repurposing. So thinking through even that. And then we put in that space a really comfortable reading chair with a reading light and an ottoman, because I wanted people to be able to sit and read and, whether it's their textbooks or settle in with a good book, I wanted that for that space. And then we also put the piano in that space because music was something I really wanted the kids to be encouraged to do. And my daughter spent hours playing piano in that space. Whereas before, the piano was a little bit separate. Moving it into that school space that was right off the kitchen, it was like it opened up this whole world of music. And so really how we set up our spaces matter. And for that time in our lives, in that house, the dining room was better served for us as a school space. Even though my kids weren't actually doing homeschooling at that time, it still was better served as a school space because they spent a ton of time in there every evening doing their homework and doing whatever they needed to do for school. So again, it's just thinking through what you will have to sacrifice something. You will have to give something up, but think through what is priority at this moment in time. That doesn't mean the dining room can never go back to a dining room. It certainly can. But for this year, the dining room or, whatever space you choose is probably going to be better served as a schoolroom.
So can you say why you chose the dining room? Because I know that house and I know there were some other spaces that could have been converted to a homework space, like where you had your TV upstairs. And why was the dining room ideal for you as a family to have as your school space?
I really wanted the kids next to the kitchen and the main living space because that's where we live. I mean, we just don't live in other parts of the house as much. And so I wanted them close. I wanted to feel like, because I'm in the kitchen a lot, I'm cooking a lot and I'm cleaning up a lot and, to all the things that we do. And so I wanted them in a place where we felt like we were present with one another. And that was the most logical space for that. It was it wasn't something where I had to like run upstairs every time I wanted to see them or help them or check on what they were doing. And so it just felt like the most natural thing to turn one of our main spaces, like I would call them a core space in the home, right? We have core spaces in the home, and the kitchen is always a core space because people love the kitchen, right? Everyone loves the kitchen. Guests love the kitchen. Your kids love the kitchen. So that's like the heart. That's the core. And then it kind of moves out from there. And I wanted them in close to that really core space in the house.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you that after we visited you, after that switch had been made, my kids said, we want a room like that.
Yeah.
And so we came home and we built what we call the Knowledge Center. So it was based off of the layout with the bar and the chalkboard wall. It was in our basement playroom. So it wasn't in our core space.
And
I think,
sometimes you can't.
yeah, but I think that's also partly why it hasn't been used very much. And also the natural light is kind of yuck down there. But it is there and it is cleaned up and it is ready for school to start because we are creating different spaces throughout our home. And that one was already there. And it has outlets. I think this was also after your design. We have outlets there because it is intended really for people to be on computers there and charging while they work, and people can be next to each other with headphones on, and it really is a good layout with bar stools for schoolwork. So one of our school spaces in our home is going to be this. And I also want to talk about repurposing a room. You know, I am sitting right now as we record in what I used to refer to as my new office. We just did some redoing in our house. Well, guess what? We have been home now since March, all 6 of us, and my husband needs an office. This is the office. And my daughter, who's a senior in high school, she wants to work in the office. So we have now officially said, this is no longer my office. This is the office. And I've had to give that up. And it's going to be like a common workspace where you sign up for a time. This is the room where we can close the door and we can have some quiet. And I just had to readjust and rethink.
And sacrifice. You had
Yeah.
to sacrifice. Yeah.
This is not what I thought it was going to be. But the truth is, during school hours, those are my off hours for doing my own work because I need to be helping the younger kids with that during that time. So when other people need this office space, it's more likely that I won't need it. Nobody else is getting up at 5:30 fighting me for this space. So
You mean
anyway,
they're not crossing your name off and putting their name on there at 5:30?
no, I'm the only one who wants to be up early. So anyway, that's just an example of right now, because of COVID, we're renaming this. It is no longer mommy's office. It is the office.
Well, and I do want to speak to moms with younger kids, because I would say that setup that you and I are talking about with the bar and the computers and you know, that really does lend itself to an older child.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to give the example of what we did when our kids were younger. So I actually did homeschool when my kids were younger by choice. And we
Not by COVID.
Yeah, by COVID. But we had a bonus room above our garage. And I understand that is great luxury, but a lot of people use that as a family room but we just partitioned it off. And so we used those wall dividers and we partitioned a section of that room, that bonus room, off as the school space. And I bought one of those kidney tables that teachers use in classrooms. Because they have adjustable legs. And so it's really great because you can make the table grow with your family. And so I got one of those kidney tables, and then I used stackable shoe racks. And we're going to link to all this stuff because I'm just linking to all the things that I used. But there's shoe racks that are flat. They're not tilted. And then I stuck plastic bins on that shoe rack that had everything in it. So for example, I had different kinds of fun scissors that we used, those ones that are like, you can make arts and crafts with. I had multicolored markers. I had a variety of stickers because at any moment, right, you can use stickers for all sorts of things. Some of the things I really, really loved in that season of homeschooling was like having chess time, because that's so good for strategy and teaching kids to think. And there's actually a game called No Stress Chess, and it's how to teach kids how to play chess. But I'm telling you, go just Google how chess helps kids' brains. You will be blown away. Like, I really recommend that you do chess with your kids. I actually am terrible at chess. I didn't learn when I was a kid. And so that's something I want my kids to know how to do. And it's really great for their development. Something else that I would keep in these shoe racks was mind bender books. So that's just basically these books. You can get them from all ages. So you get mind benders for kindergartners, mind benders for preschoolers, mind benders for 7th to 8th graders. And they're just these riddles that, again, really deeply engage their thinking and their critical thinking. So I loved having mind benders. I always had a laminator handy because I would laminate all sorts of things. I'd laminate flashcards, times tables. I mean, and my kids, okay, this is funny. My boys started laminating their Star Wars guys from their sticker books. They had Star Wars sticker books, and they would put the stickers on paper, and then they would laminate them, and then they would cut them out, and they would play with them like figurines.
Mm-hmm.
So you never know what the laminator will be used for, but actually the laminator was really handy. And I also had like a rotary paper cutter right there. And then we had kids magazines, like a whole section of that area was for kids magazines. So we did Sports Illustrated for kids because I have 3 of my 4 boys and they love it. My daughter
We used
kind
to
of
get
liked
that.
it. Yeah, I was going to say my daughter kind of liked it too, but my
Mm-hmm.
boys really loved it.
Mm-hmm.
National Geographic Kids is fabulous. And so that's a great magazine to get. It's just so educational, and the pictures are obviously unbelievable. And at the time, we used a lot of Vicki Courtney's magazines, but now the equivalent that I found when I was looking it up for this episode was 101 Things Every Girl Should Know. That's kind of an equivalent, and it's by Faith Girls, which was started by a friend of ours. And so
Mm-hmm.
they have some magazines, but we just like to keep magazines, in
Yeah.
that, so that, because here's the thing, it's very difficult to school all the kids at one time. And so one of my strategies always was having, if everyone's at that kidney table, that I would actually have one child reading magazines while I'm helping the other child. And
Mm-hmm.
then I would have one child doing stickers and making, crafts or whatever with the scissors and stickers while I was doing something else. And then within the same space, we actually created a book nook. We actually had 2 things, a book nook and a costume corner.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them were used a ton. But the book nook, I would say, was especially helpful. And I just kept really good literature there. So I bought specifically a bookshelf that was a double bookshelf. And on the back, I put almost like a beadboard. And so that was, again, a wall divider. So then I put
Mm-hmm.
a beanbag there, some pillows, a light, like made it really comfy. And it was separate from the school space. And
Mm-hmm.
so I could send kids there when I was working with someone else. I could send kids over there to the book nook. And I had some great series in there, like the Little House series, which is phenomenal for teaching kids just really great values. Chronicles of Narnia, all of that, like, just had really great literature. And then I would have reading time where the kids could go and read. So that's a little bit about how I set up the space for younger kids.
Yeah. I'll throw in a couple magazine suggestions. Focus on the Families magazines, Clubhouse, Clubhouse Junior, and Brio is back in print. Those are all great. And I have one kid especially who gets super excited when Clubhouse magazine arrives. And because I still have a third grader and a fifth grader at home, we just went through our books and got rid of all of our baby board books, except for the few that I just could not part with. But we reorganized all of our books based on picture books, chapter books, series. And so now as books rotate through, it's easy because we're organized for me to put things back. I feel like a librarian. It's super fun.
Right.
And we didn't get any new bookshelves. We just used the toy shelves in our toy closet.
Yeah.
Because as we're getting rid of younger kid toys, it's making room for just organization, but for bookshelves. And so we are really trying to take advantage of this time to get organized in our home with our stuff.
So
And
good.
the truth is, we're using things we already have to create what feels like school spaces. So this summer when we redid our books, I told the girls, now again, this was the younger girls because the older girls aren't going there to find their reading. This is like the library because our library is still closed. We can't go to the library. You're not going to be able to go to your school library, closed. So this is what we're going to draw from right now. And I just want to encourage moms that you can use the stuff you already have. The other thing, you mentioned Facebook Marketplace. I bought two, I don't know how I scored, two red file cabinets that are like mini craft file cabinets on wheels. They're metal.
Oh, yeah.
They were $10 each, so I did not bust the bank with them. And it was someone who had a daycare who was no longer doing daycare because of COVID, was getting rid of them. And we organized all of our craft supplies into them. And they're just little tiny drawers. So I could do like what you said, organize all of the scissors, all of the crayons. And I paid my 15-year-old $10 to organize it. So the whole thing cost me $20. And I want to sing the Hallelujah chorus every time I look at it because it's labeled and organized and lovely. But it was mostly with stuff we already had. I bought this one little organization system used. So just remember, it doesn't take a lot.
No, and I'm the biggest fan of Facebook Marketplace because why not?
Mm-hmm.
And people are always flipping things. You just have to, the trick to that is you have to act quickly because stuff gets really snatched up. So you do have to check periodically, but like I'm never on Facebook, but I'll pop on Facebook Marketplace really fast, see if anything new has come up that I am specifically looking for. So I don't just go on there and browse,
Right.
but let's say I'm looking for a bookshelf. I will go bookcase and every day I'll just go on there real quick, take a look, see if anyone's posted anything new. And then if something's there, you have to act really fast. So you do have, there is an urgency piece. Do you want to know a trick? One of the things you can do to reserve something if you can't go get it that day is you ask them if you can Venmo them.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll
I did that yesterday.
And you'll pay $5 or $10 extra dollars. Say, I will pay you $5 or $10 extra dollars if you will let me Venmo you. And then if you'll hold it until Monday or whatever, whenever you can go. And most of the time they're so happy you paid over asking the $5, they will totally do it.
Yeah. And I lost something yesterday for our school space, a West Elm lamp. It was a good deal.
Oh.
And I said, I can come this afternoon. She said, can you come right now? I said, I can come this afternoon. I should have Venmo'd her. I should have said.
And you pay over asking because that's like that motivating factor. They're like, oh, they're paying over asking.
Yeah.
Depending on how valuable it is, you probably may want to go $10, not just $5, but it usually works.
Well, and we sold some things this last weekend because we're making space for our school spaces. So we're trying to de-junk. We sold some pieces of furniture. And I learned that I undersold because I had like 5 offers within 5 minutes and people saying, I can come right now. And I'm like, oh, I guess this is priced really well. But that was fine. I wanted them to come get it right now. So that was great. Okay. So as moms are considering their spaces and they've decided, okay, this is the space that I can repurpose for school, or this is the space that we're primarily going to do school, what should they be thinking through?
Well, so I want to talk about the 5 clarifying questions that you really should ask in any space. And some of these are obvious because we're talking about school, but the first one is just, what is the purpose of the space? And for most people, the purpose of their space is going to be schooling at home. So creating a space my kids can actually learn. So maybe get specific in that, And number 2 is, what will we do here? So what will we do? Okay, will you do arts and crafts there? Will it be totally 100% computers? Will it be a combination of books and computers and art and music, or whatever you're doing, right? So everyone this year for schooling at home is going to have different needs, and according to the ages of the children is key with that, right? Because our older kids are doing almost 100% online if they're doing it through school, whereas the younger kids are not, or if you're choosing a homeschool curriculum, that's not the case. So what are you going to do there? Literally write the answers to these down, because this is going to determine how you set up your space. Number 3 is, how do I want people to feel when they arrive or they enter this area? So do I want them to feel like, ooh, this is a space for learning? Do I want them to feel like, oh, how cozy, this is a space where I can curl up with a good book? Do you want them to feel like, okay, this is where I am going to get really creative, And so how do you want people to feel? Number 4, what specific goals do you have for that space? So again, these kind of all run together, but what are your goals? Do you want this to be like, okay, every single day for 2 hours, this space needs to move my child forward in their education? And then number 5, what do I want the space to say? So again, this is a little woo-woo, the question, but it's like, what do I want this space? It kind of goes with how do I want people to feel when they enter? But what do I want this space to say? When people come in, are they going to be inspired? Do I have some things on the walls that inspire people, whether that's art or sayings or whatever? Do I have a world map on the wall? Because I want the space to say, this is a place we're going to learn about the world and about all sorts of things going on. What do I want it to say? And then that's going to determine these next things we're going to talk about, which is how we actually set up the space.
So can I go back to question number 4, to the specific goals? What specific goals do I have for this space? For somebody who's, say, living in a 2-bedroom apartment with their kids, and they feel like, I don't have a great room. So the goal for this space may be multifaceted throughout the day. So is it fair to say, my goal for this space from 9 a.m. until noon is school, but then from 4:00 until 8:00, it's food prep?
Totally.
And so you're going to make decisions based on, can I take the school bucket, or what do you call it? Something with a handle that you remove that from the space so that you can then reclaim your kitchen as a kitchen for the afternoon. So that is a legit thing, that maybe the goals are that it is flexible for different needs throughout the day or different days of the week. That during the weekend, I need this to be a space where everybody can hang out and we can't have school projects spread out everywhere. So how are we going to design it so that we can transition this room?
100%. And we can talk more about that in some of these next principles.
Okay. So for those of us who are not design inclined, after we've answered these questions, now what do we do?
Okay. So literally get out a paper, answer those questions, because that does inform what happens next. You have to be very clear about what is the purpose, the goals, the feeling that I want to happen here. Okay. So that's where we're starting. Now, how do we set up the room? So the first thing you want to do, and this is Mike Smith, who we've had on the podcast before. She's just a great kind of DIY home design person. And she has a concept called quieting the room that I just like the way she phrases that. Is that something I was doing before, but I just like the way she phrases it, because I think it really does give you a picture of what it is when you take everything out. So her thing is take everything out, take every piece of furniture out, take everything off the walls, literally every single thing you take out of the space to quiet, what she calls quieting the room. And that just means in order to look at it with fresh eyes, you need to take everything out that's not nailed to the wall,
Yeah.
obviously. Okay. So that's the first one.
And we've been doing that a lot this summer in our house as we've been reorganizing,
It
quieting the room.
helps.
And my husband now is like, are we still quieting the room? I'm like, Michaelin says we need to leave it for like 3 days. We can't just quiet the room for 20 minutes.
Right.
We got to sit with it. Everything is a process. We got to sit with it.
Yeah. And it really is helpful because it gives you new eyes. It's kind of like when we just live with the way that our house is year after year after year, and things are falling apart year after year after year because we get numb to it. We get used to it. We stop seeing, oh, that wall is completely cracked, or there seems to be something growing there, or, like whatever it is, we get numb to it because we just year after year don't look at things with fresh eyes. And so what it allows us to do is to put on new glasses. Okay, number 2 is create a plan for your room. And I really do encourage Pinterest. Even if you do not use Pinterest for any other reason, this is a great time to create a Pinterest board that has the things that you're hoping to communicate or to set up in this room. So for example, I would start pinning rooms that are appealing to me aesthetically. Okay. So like I will say, okay, I'm creating this school room. So maybe I go to Pinterest, I enter school room in the search engine, and I start pinning things that stand out to me. Ooh, that's the feeling I want. Oh, I like the colors that this person chose, right? I start pinning, and what you're going to start seeing is there's going to be a theme to your pins. So then you go to your board and you look at the board and you look at all the pins and you say, what are the common denominators here? And chances are it's because this gets to some of the woo-woo questions we asked. That's the feeling you want in the room. Usually it's not necessarily like the setup may not even be what you're looking for because that room is totally different than yours that you're setting up, but it's the feeling. And so that's when you go, okay, I see that I want it to feel calm. I see that the colors that they're choosing are serene and peaceful. And that's actually what I want in our room. So you start to notice some of the common denominators, and that's helpful. So that's the second thing. And then I would say, create a plan. And I'm going to tell you some really key things you can do to create. Again, this is if you have like, for example, you have an office. And so multiple people are going to be using that. So this would be something you could do for the office. But you can even do this in small scale, and we'll get back to the apartment example. But paint, if you have a space that is enclosed or, a room that you can use, paint is the quickest and easiest way to create a new feeling in a space. And so if you go to your Pinterest board and everything is white, and you decided you want that as your palette for all these fun images, school images, whether that's a map and posters and sayings, then go white. The second thing would be to add a rug. Rugs add so much warmth to a space, and they add so much personality. And so I would really recommend that you look on Target.com. Costco often carries great rugs. You can find rugs for fairly inexpensive. Wayfair, of course, is a great place to look, but look for a rug that, again, communicates the feeling that you want in the room.
Can I give a tip on that? Because we just bought a rug. I mean, we're the cheapos, right? Like we do everything on the cheap, but I'm deciding it's time to be a grown-up and buy quality things. So we got new carpet, wall-to-wall carpet in part of our house this summer. While we were there, now this wasn't at a big box store. This was at an independent rug store. They had remnants, and we bought a wool remnant. So somebody put wool wall-to-wall carpeting in their home. I don't know who does that, but they did. And we bought a remnant, and once we get it sized right to the room, I'm going to take it and have edges put on it, because right now it's just kind of cut. They used a box cutter or whatever to cut it. But for a fraction of the cost, for a large full room wool rug, I was able to get it same day because it was a remnant. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have them cut it down to the exact size dimensions I want once we get the sofa, because we're waiting on a sofa. Once we get the sofa in and figure out the dimensions, because I'm not going to decide the dimensions of the rug until I have the sofa and the furniture I have. So
Yeah,
anyway, that's my
great.
tip on finding a quality rug on the cheap.
It's a great tip. It's a really good one. And I would say the other tip is, for my office this year, I bought 2 rugs at Costco that I loved. And it was like that faux sheepskin, really soft. But they were small. They were only 5x7s. And so I actually went on Amazon. I got carpet binding tape.
Oh yeah.
And I literally just taped the 2 rugs together to make a big rug. And it's great. And the tape holds really well. So that's another trick you can use when you find a rug you really love, but it's not big enough. Okay, well, the next thing would be furniture placement, and deciding what furniture you need. And you and I already talked about some creative ways to get the furniture that you need if you don't already have it. But I would say for schooling, the best investment, and this may be your highest investment that you can make, is a good table space for kids to work. They have to have some kind of flat surface area for kids to work. And if it's going to be mainly non-digital, I would really look at those kidney tables or something like that, or just a table. And then if it is digital, I really do think those bars work great, where you have a computer in some of it and then you have workspace on some of the other. So that would be my encouragement with that. And then you have to just decide on placement. Where are things going to go? And you can just sketch that out on a piece of paper. And then the last thing is choose your wall decor. And again, that just creates what feeling do I want to communicate in this space. So paint, rug, furniture, placement, and wall decor. Those are really your categories that you can focus on to figure out how to set up your space well.
Mm-hmm. And that can be in the corner of a room.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just redid my younger 2 daughters share a room. And we did essentially a cozy reading corner in their room, partly because we knew they would be home reading.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What else do we need to know?
Well, I was just going to give a few tips from what I've learned over the years with schooling at home. And a couple of just, we like to be practical here at the Sisterhood. So I thought I would just give some practical things that I really, really loved. So the first one, and this doesn't have to do with setting up space, it's more about curriculum and, just some hacks. The first one is the book that I swear by, I taught all my kids to read, is called Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. And it's something you do with them their kindergarten year. You could also do it their first grade year, but they're usually not ready before kindergarten. You have to see what their readiness is. But I'm telling you, it's magic. This book, this program, after teaching 4 kids to read, I still can't quite figure out the method. All I know is at the end of this book, all of my kids were reading at a solid 2nd grade plus level. And it set them up so beautifully to just soar, because reading is so foundational. And so it was the best thing that I did in homeschooling was this book. So for parents with younger kids, I would highly recommend it. There's another book I love called The Children's Book of Art. And it really is just exposing kids to really amazing, beautiful art in a creative way. So that's another resource. And then I did Rosetta Stone with my kids when they were younger. Did they learn Spanish as children? No, they absolutely did not. Did it connect those brain synapses? I think it did. All of my kids, now that they're older, are really, really amazing at language. And I can't say for sure, but I wonder if that time spent in their early years connected those language synapses in the brain that now is allowing them to really soar with language. And I don't know, but I think it did. You may know
Okay.
that.
Well, yeah, I don't know all the brain science behind it, but I do know that the earlier you're exposed to a second language, the easier it is later in life to learn one, even
Mhm.
if it's not the same language. So,
Yeah, it just makes sense to me, and I see it now. Like my kids are really, really like they learn Spanish really easily, and that was not the case for me in high school. Like
mhm,
it was hard, and so I think there was a difference there.
mhm.
The other thing is this is a great time for kids to learn typing because typing is
Yes.
so foundational. So there's a program called Typing Club
Mhm,
that you can download. And that's a great typing program and they do it in a fun way. They do games and the kids learn, how to use their fingers on the keyboard through games. So I think it's a great time for kids to get really good at typing. And then I would say some of the other resources have to do with we would use this for like their play alone time, or like if I was really needing to focus on school with one child, I would have another child doing this, like for example, in the book nook. And that is to have some kind of boom box. I know that's a old old thing. Like we don't even have boom boxes anymore, but actually they do. And that has headphones in it. So what I don't want, and so I know some parents will be in the same camp as me. I don't want my kids on an iPad for
mhm,
hours where they can then go to the games or they can pull up a search engine or whatever. Like, I don't want them in a corner with a device. And so bringing back the boom box because, that's all they can do is the boom
mhm,
box and it has a CD player. And we would use, of course, you mentioned Adventures in Odyssey, big fans. We were big
mhm.
fans of Adventures in Odyssey when my kids were young. There's also a great not curriculum, but CDs called Your Story Hour. And they really are kind of curriculum because you can choose biblical stories, you can choose history, and they do it in story form, like Adventures in Odyssey is in story form. Your Story Hour is historically based in stories. And so it's so engaging and really, really fun for the kids to listen to. And they're learning a ton while they're listening. Hank the Cowdog, they're kind of silly, but they're super fun stories. The kids love listening to those. But anything you can find that has like history in a story format or
Mhm,
American Girls, I mean, they do a
mhm,
fantastic job of putting things in story form that's historically based. So that was a great way to learn and also for them to be independent because
mhm.
that's the key thing, right? Is teaching kids that they can be independent while you're doing other things.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll just say one thing I've done with my girls because we don't have a boombox, but I'm with you. If I hand over an iPad, I come back in, they're watching YouTube. I mean, it happens. So I will connect either the iPad or my phone to a speaker through Bluetooth, let them take the speaker into the room, and I control what they're listening to. So I say, okay, because we are big Adventures in Odyssey home, and they actually, if they're listening to Adventures in Odyssey, I don't have to worry about them because they're so engaged. But music, sometimes they'll ask to listen to music, and what they end up doing is watching videos on YouTube, music videos, and that's not what we agreed to. So I will let the video play next to me, and I will have the screen in my possession, but the music is streaming in their room. So that the same could be true of audiobooks or any of those audio stories.
yeah, that's a great workaround. I like that workaround. That's creative.
Yeah, because we don't have a boombox, but I like
Right.
it. I like the good old cassette and push play. They're not as independent because they can't push play and stop like they can. But it allows them to have that quiet time where I also have some quiet time.
Yeah, and they're actually not that expensive. I mean, they're like $20, I want to say, on Amazon. So I think it's a worthy investment. If you're looking at doing this for a whole semester, if not longer, it just feels like a really worthy investment to me
Yeah.
to get some of these CDs that help kids learn and some player of some kind. And then I say the last tip I have is really helping kids to learn how to be managing their own schedules. So you can get them a weekly planner that is for kids specifically. I also use whiteboards, and I've talked about that before on the podcast, but we use big whiteboards for planning. And those are great life skills for kids to learn. And I think as we're looking at schooling at home, think about, how can you do even time in the kitchen with the kids? And that's a part of school. How can you teach them how to plan and how to write things out and keep a planner, and organization is key. So that would be my other tip, is make sure you have like a mailbox for each child as you're schooling throughout the year. Where does their stuff go? Think in terms of being a teacher and how a classroom is set up. Everybody has a space. This is where my stuff is. This is where I turn things in, so that organizationally you're not going crazy chasing papers down all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those of us who have lots of kids that we're managing, it gets exponential, this stuff. Okay. Well, Krista, thank you for all of these great tips. And I will say, I have used Krista as my consult before. So if you are interested in having her be your professional space consultant, that is part of what she does. And this is a great way to use her. She's giving us some tips, insider tips right now, but she can look at your space. She can FaceTime with you, Marco Polo with you, and see exactly what you're working with, so that she can give specific ideas to your particular space. So we would love to see what your school spaces look like. Send us pictures. You can do that through Instagram, and we will be sharing some of our workspaces too over there. So we wish you the best, moms, as you start school. We are halfway through our series here on back to school COVID style. And we love talking about space and how to make it work for our families. So we want to hear how it's working for you.
Good jobs, moms or dads. And you are doing awesome. And remember, the individual attention, this is an opportunity that you may never have again. And so soak it up. Don't get too stressed. Don't put too many expectations on yourself. Enjoy it. Have fun. Enjoy your kids, knowing that this actually could turn into one of the biggest gifts of your kids' entire childhood.
Yeah, this extra time together.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Happy back to school, everybody.
Happy back to school. Bye.
Bye.